Hi, guys, and welcome to Ayahuasca podcast. As always, with you, the host, Sam Believ. Today, I'm having a conversation with Norman Ohler. Norman is an investigative author and storyteller whose best selling books, Blitzed and Tripped, uncover the surprising influence of drugs from meth in Nazi Germany to psychedelics in modern society. His work challenges how we view history and drugs. Norman, I'm really excited to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited too.
Norman, let's start with your story. You know what in your life took you to studying drugs and psychedelics and Nazis. What's the story?
I don't know. It's a complicated question. Maybe, maybe it was my upbringing in a boring German small town that made me suspicious that there must be another world hidden somewhere, kind of like in David Lynch's movies, when you kind of go through the portal of an ear that you find lying on the floor, and you enter a totally different world, and maybe that's the real world. So I guess I was always curious.
So I believe you were, if not the first guy, but one of the first people to actually discover that Nazi military they used the math. Was is that correct?
Well, I made it popular and I discovered most of the facts, but my work is based on the work of a historian at a southern German university who had found out that pervitin, which was methamphetamine, was being used in the campaign against France, and he published a scientific paper about it, which I read, but it was not very known. But it was quite interesting. So I met him, and he said, "Well, where I found these documents, there's actually a lot more, but I just don't have the time or the interest to really go deeper into the subject." And he was so kind as to refer the actual signatures in the military archive of Germany to me, so I knew where I had to look. And that was the starting point of my extensive research. And then I was, I guess, the first person to really write the story, to really investigate the full story, also including the drug use of Hitler, which had not been properly examined, I would say, even though there were also already writings about this. So my work is based on also the research that other people did, I would say.
Hmm. No, it's not a regular topic for the podcast, but I think it's just really fascinating. You don't really expect, to think about, you know, historical people and their use of drugs or psychedelics or stimulants and things like that. We kind of never view history from that lens, but yeah, it kind of all makes sense when you add the methamphetamine to the mix. The history starts to make sense. The Blitzkrieg and everything. So, what's the most interesting thing you found about Hitler and his drug use?
Uh, he even took an MAO inhibitor towards the end of his drug career.
Hmm.
Um, I think it was Syrian Rue an MAO inhibitor, or is that a DMT containing plant?
Um, I think Acacia is a DMT and Siren Rue is the MAOI. I'm gonna check while you're telling the story. I'm gonna check.
So Hitler was very advantageous in his drug use, and he basically tried everything. He never really used ayahuasca, I think. At least I didn't find any reference to that because I think it was completely unknown in Nazi Germany. This was like
Hmm.
before William Burroughs discovered it in the rainforest. So, but other than that, I was quite fascinated by the extent of Hitler's drug use, which was not only actually it wasn't really methamphetamine. Methamphetamine was for the soldiers, and Hitler was not really a fan of methamphetamine because he was more into kind of finer highs, like opioid highs. I don't know if finer is the right word, but he was more into opioids and cocaine than into meth. Um, that in itself, that Hitler would use a lot of opioids was surprising to me, especially learning from his personal physician's private notes that he gave these drugs or medications intravenously. So Hitler actually received an injection almost every day, if not every day. Some days are not recorded. I thought when I saw that in the archive that that was quite extraordinary because the SS people that were guarding Hitler, they were like describing how this weird doctor always, walks in and then, the doors shut and then the doors open again and he walks out with a syringe and he washes it in the wash basin. And that's quite weird, especially if you know that one of the core points of Nazi ideology was their war against drugs. They kind of invented the war against drugs.
Mm.
So you can see like how hypocritical they were. On the one hand, putting people in concentration camps for drug use. On the other hand, like doing it themselves so they could improve their performance or increase their mood or work against their depression and anxiety. So that whole story is just fascinating. Uh,
Mm.
I just loved researching it and writing it.
It is really fascinating because I mean MAOI, yeah, and I checked Syrian Rue is the MAOI. It's basically almost halfway there, Just one more ingredient and you got ayahuasca. Imagine if Hitler would have ayahuasca. Like could have changed the history quite a bit.
Well, I mean, I'm not really an expert on ayahuasca yet, but I mean, I know some things, and I also learned, but correct me if I'm wrong, that tribes have also used it to get ready for war, like to create a community that could defend or itself against an outsider or attack an outsider. So I think ayahuasca, not if that is true, then that would mean that ayahuasca doesn't necessarily like turn you into a peaceful or better person. It certainly could, but it also could like create a sense of we against the other. So not sure how Hitler would have reacted on ayahuasca. I don't know if he would have seen the cosmic truth that we're all one, or whether it would
Mm.
have reinforced his belief that him and the Germans were a superior race. It's hard to say,
Mm.
actually.
That's a good question because we've given ayahuasca to more than 2,000 people, and in most cases, it leads to ego dissolution and sort of this feeling of connectedness and sort of love. But it's also the container, right? But in some rare cases, for some people who already have a big ego, it actually makes their ego stronger and they get all kinds of like thoughts about how they are extra special. So, yeah, I don't know. You never know, but I've seen it going both ways. I think in that case the container matters more. So if you would have accidentally synthesized ayahuasca, like pharmahuasca, basically like the Syrian Rue version, I yeah, it would definitely do something, but we don't know what. So it would change the history, but to which direction it
Right.
would be. You could probably write another book about this, but your first book was Blitzed, and it was about Nazis and methamphetamine, Hitler and his drug use. And your second book took you more is Stripped, and it took you more towards psychedelics. So there was connection between Germans, Swiss, LSD, and this. It's a fascinating story. So just give us your take on it from whichever angle you want to start.
Um, well, I think should all read the book. That's kind of um, hard for me to summarize it because it's kind of, I don't know, it's a hard thing to do. And the philosopher Nietzsche said you actually shouldn't do it. You should let this book speak for itself. But let's frame it that way, that I became interested in LSD a long time ago, actually, when I first took it in my 20s. But I never thought it would become a topic for a book. I just used it for my own personal growth and recreation also. But I guess it's always for me as a learning experience. I don't do just LSD just for fun, but it became even more serious in a way, or important, when I read a study that LSD and microdoses could help against dementia, which by now I do think can work. I somehow believe that from all the evidence I know, that psychedelics are quite healthy for the brain, especially for the aging brain. I might be wrong, but that seems to be the case to me. So that study was interesting to me because my mother suffers from Alzheimer's and I wanted to help her. So I discussed this with my father, who takes care of my mother, and also with her to some degree. And especially my father, who had been a judge in Germany, was kind of skeptical because he said, if LSD is so beneficial, why can I not buy it in the pharmacy? Which is a very obvious question, but also a very naive question, obviously, especially coming from a judge who's like part of the war on drugs, or at least sentenced people to prison for using drugs, like he did. I mean, mostly not psychedelics, but more like heroin and cocaine, especially in my hometown and in the southwest of Germany. Especially heroin was quite big there. Um, so I said to him, I'm going to research, why it actually did become illegal, because also I was interested in it. Albert Hoffman, the discoverer of LSD, wrote a book on his own discovery, which he calls LSD, My Problem Child. And in it, he explains the process of LSD becoming illegal as a result to the hippie movement overdoing the drug in the 60s. And I I don't believe that story. And I think that Hoffman, and I don't know why he did that. It's an interesting question that should be researched at one point. He omitted what happened in the late 40s and in the 50s. He just doesn't write about it, even though he must have known what happened to LSD because he was Mr. LSD. So I try to figure out what actually happened, focusing on the discovery point of LSD and then the later 40s and the early 50s. And by going to the archives of Sandoz, for which Hoffman worked and where he discovered LSD in Basel, Switzerland, archives that are now owned by Novartis, which is the company that bought Sandoz in the 90s. I was able to find correspondence between the CEO of Sandoz and the leading Nazi biochemist Richard Kuhn, discussing the ergot research that Sandoz has done, and also discussing LSD in 1943 when Sandoz discovered it. The Nazis basically knew about it because this Kuhn guy, the German, and the guy, the Swiss CEO, they had been best friends since the 20s, which was a coincidence, I guess, or maybe not a coincidence, but it was a fact. So they were friends and they stayed friends also during the dictatorship of National Socialism. And Stoll also was not reluctant to share his research with Kuhn. They always had shared their research, especially on ergot. They had exchanged, their knowledge. So Kuhn, the Nazi, he knew a lot about ergot research, and then received also LSD from Stoll. And at that time, he was responsible for developing a truth drug for Hitler, because the Nazis, being paranoid right wingers, wanted to know, who belongs to us and who's our enemy. So the idea was to develop a drug that can extract all the secrets from someone during an interrogation, for example, because they had run into problems getting information out of Polish resistance fighters. So they wanted to break that resistance, that will of the other person. And then they did, in order to find out whether psychedelics could be the truth drug that they were searching for, they conducted SS experiments in the concentration camp of Dachau in 1943, 44, and early 45 until the camp was liberated by American military in April 45. And when it was liberated, the Americans found these documents documenting the psychedelic experiments in order to find a truth drug. So the American military became interested in psychedelics, which they had never been interested in before, obviously, because psychedelics were totally new. So they were like, "What is this? What is this mescaline that they're using here? What is this odorless, tasteless substance, which was most likely LSD that they were using here?" And that interest was then adopted by the CIA, which was formed in 47, which was, the Central Intelligence Agency that was supposed to bring America into shape as being the superpower in competition with the Soviet Union in the emerging Cold War. So the CIA kind of took over the truth drug research from the military, which had taken it over from the Nazis. So that's kind of the line of truth drug experiments that I was able to describe in Tripped, which had never been, to my knowledge, that link has never been found or described. So that's what makes the book Tripped unique, and obviously also the story that I then bring back to my father in the end of the book. That's just I really summed it up very briefly. I mean, the whole
Mhm.
story is quite fascinating, actually. So I tell my father the story, and then he kind of realizes, yeah, LSD was not made illegal because it's dangerous for your health, but it was made illegal for political and ideological reasons. And those reasons did not apply to him at this point. And then he decided to use LSD with my mother together in microdoses, and that actually didn't lead to her recovery, but it did lead to a slowing down of the disease and of improving her cognitive abilities. So that's the happy ending of Trip.
Yeah, thank you for summarizing it. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to read the books, but I've listened to quite a few podcasts, so I kind of know that the books are really good. People say that they're really well written and they're fun to read. Because I believe also in beginning of your career you're a nonfiction writer. So, but
Yeah, podcasts are just scratching the surface, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah.
The books go.
No, I definitely recommend for everyone to read the book, and I will definitely find time myself. The story is just like it's pretty interesting how one person, in this case you yourself, because you just looked at things differently, you discovered like this new angle, and like we all kind of accept the conventional story, like in Michael Pollan's books. There was LSD and hippies overused it, but it's like basically the reason LSD spread to US was because CIA took interest in it, was because of Nazis had interest in it. And it's like then this MK Ultra experiment, right, that kind of went astray. So it's like we wouldn't have that second wave of psychedelics if not for CIA. Like it's interesting how
Yeah, but
there's always deeper.
that's what John Lennon said. We have to thank the CIA because they brought us
Mm.
LSD. Um, I probably wouldn't go so far as to thank the CIA, but because there was also at the same time, which maybe John Lennon didn't know, a lot of legitimate LSD research. Sandoz also gave LSD. They gave a lot to the CIA. They did, And the CIA tried to get a monopoly on LSD, but they didn't have it for quite a while. And Sandoz also gave it to researchers, actually for free. You just had to write to Sandoz in the 50s saying that you want to do research with LSD, and you got free samples. They never sold it. This, I think they changed it to selling at a certain point in time, but that was quite shortly before it became illegal. For a long time, you could just get it from them because they were also interested in the reports. You know what because they also had they didn't really know what it's good for. It was a problem for them as it is for psychedelic pharmaceutical startups today to really turn a psychedelic into a product, because the regulations of, for example, the FDA in America or of other regulating bodies in other countries, they're not really designed to uh, evaluate and appreciate psychedelic medicines, because they're just different animals. So it's hard for pharmaceutical companies to put them onto the market, and Sandoz completely failed. You know, they were not able to turn LSD into a product, and certainly the pressure from the CIA, you know, didn't help at all. But even without that pressure, it would have been difficult for them to do it.
Yeah. So you mentioned the the effects on the brain and the story with your mother and that her symptoms improved. So I can't really talk about all psychedelics, but so I was speaking to you for a while before MAPS, and then we met at MAPS in person. And also at MAPS, I met this guy Luke Jensen. I also interviewed him for the podcast, and now he's here at the retreat, and we're doing a study where we brain map people before the ayahuasca retreat and after ayahuasca retreat. And so far, it's the results are really good. It's very clear. We just need a bigger sample size, so it
What
definitely works.
changes
And
in the brain?
what?
What changes in the brain?
So that's the weirdest part is that if you take, for example, a medication of some sorts, you know that it's going to improve something and increase something and decrease something else. Like I'm still very new to it, but what he describes that somehow ayahuasca can increase and decrease same areas of the brain depending on what is needed. So that's kind of a little bit woo woo, but the conclusion is somehow psychedelics or this plant medicines, traditional plant medicines, they they affect the brain for the better. So if let's say you have low activity in a certain area of the brain, it will increase it. If you have high activity, it will decrease it, which kind of makes no sense from pharmacological point of view. But that's the observation. So basically, the brain improves,
Hmm.
and there's like scores to measure it. We're still very early to it. We maybe have scanned maybe 30 brains or so, but it seems very interesting. And hopefully, but when you come visit, we can scan your brain as well,
Yeah,
if
of
you don't mind.
course. I mean,
So,
I find it highly absurd that, like, governments are not trying to develop this for the good of their own citizens. You know, if I was leading a nation, I would probably want everyone to be as smart as possible. So I would like encourage people to research something like brain mapping. And but our governments, they do like the opposite. They make it actually illegal to use these substances, and then like you have to, you know, it's really strange. Doesn't make sense to me from a leadership point of view, unless
mm,
you want like a society full of dumb people, which is probably what capitalist societies are aiming for. So people just become consumers instead of liberated beings. That's why we have to get rid of
well,
capitalism, by the way.
it's definitely a little political, and it's kind of hard to know exactly what's going on. One way, um, one way would be to assume that there is some kind of like thought behind it and some kind of conspiracy, and they just, for example, big pharma doesn't want ayahuasca to get popular. but also from the government point of view, I think
You're
government would
frozen.
be.
I don't know if you can
I
still
mean,
hear
if
me.
I was government, I would want like a lot of very well trained people that know one specific thing, but they don't really question how the things are done. And if you look, you as a journalist and now historian through your books, you probably found many many moments where governments are not really doing the right thing. There's like ulterior motives, and I definitely question the way our society is structured. And you kind of need unhappy people in order to consume. If you're really happy, if you're really grounded, you're probably going to live somewhere close to nature, just eat good food, and you're probably not going to buy the absolute newest iPhone because there won't be any necessity. So there's definitely some problems with that. And I think psychedelics, unfortunately for us and unfortunately for governments, kind of reveal it to people. The amount of people that came here, for example, to Loire, and they just said like, I don't want to do this job anymore, I don't want to have this relationship or whatever, it just becomes obviously clear to them almost immediately. What do you think, what's the perfect society, and how do you think that psychedelics can improve us as humans, maybe help us evolve?
Well, I think the perfect society must be an egalitarian planetary society where every human being has the same political rights and where also the social situations are, you know, coming towards each other. Um, it's intolerable that some of us live in overabundance while others are actually starving. Because people are not starving because they're like lazy or useless human beings. It's just because they're unlucky being born in a certain area. And I think that a happy human society can only be one where we acknowledge um, that we're all different, obviously, but at the same time that we, are empathetic, loving creatures that take care of each other. So we have to find a way to organize this. So I have a few ideas, like a global minimum basic income to which every human being is entitled. Um, I think there should be no borders. Everyone should have the right to live in Colombia or in Thailand or in Germany. And I think we need to curb the power of the nation states. We have to abolish national armies. We have to have a taboo on violence against other human beings. And we have to organize ourselves in a somewhat egalitarian and just way on a planetary scale, which probably will work with the help of a kind of an AI system or a web of AI systems that help us and support us and that help us with the distribution of food and wealth and raw materials. And so it's a completely different society that I envision will come after this society that we have right now, which is a society based on separation, violence, um, prohibition, will cease to exist, stop to exist. So I think there will be a completely different way of life. I just hope that I will still see it, and that you will still see it. I don't know how long it will take. I mean, the current system could collapse quite quickly, but it could also, drag on for another 100 years, which of course would be a drag because so many people will suffer and die, and the planet will be ruined. Um, so I think we are living in a pre-revolutionary situation, and we just have to organize in a way, like we have to, probably develop a um, blockchain based artificial intelligence, including ways to communicate which are not the social media channels we're using right now, but which are channels which enable us to keep our data and not give our data to some asshole in the United States who then sells it to make advertisement and to manipulate our brain waves and all this shit. So actually, we're really in deep shit right now. I mean, we all feel it that the capitalist system that we have let evolve, actually since the 90s, I would say, since Bill Clinton like enabled like this high speed capitalism to really kind of take over. I think we can all sense that this is coming to an end. Um, I think the war in Gaza right now is like a we can like see like what's happening if we continue to live this way. It's just horrible how we treat other people by now. We starve them to death and destroy them from the air with like planes like dropping bombs on tents. And I mean, what the fuck is going on? This is really this is really a disgrace for humankind how we are living right now with these leaders in the United States, criminals in the government, in Israel, criminals in the government. In Germany, is the same, There's no real, like, all China, Russia, they're all North Korea, Iran, they're all ruled by ruthless criminals, Turkey. It's really hardcore. And this is not for the good of us human beings. And this is actually what my next book is about. I'm writing a new world history, which is called Stone Sapiens, which kind of makes it
Mm.
clear what our history so far has been and who we actually are as human beings and what we need to do to create a different narrative and get rid of these chains that are holding us all back and creating so much suffering on the planet right now.
Yeah, it's a definitely a noteworthy topic to write about, and it seems obvious, yeah, that something is really, really wrong right now. I like to say that we are sort of in a arms race, like everyone, with people that want to sort of raise the consciousness through plant medicines, meditation, and books, and many things like this to kind of like tell people like, okay, pay attention. This is what we are. And then on the other side, it's people that are just sort of crazy, and all they want is more power, and they don't want to let go of that power. It's like, depending on who wins, we either gonna disappear as a species or maybe evolve to the next step. And I kind of like your Stone Sapiens name, but definitely
You
like
don't like it?
I like it. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I think that if we get to the point where psychedelics are mainstream, it will just get more difficult for people to ignore the deeper layers, as in like spiritual reality of existence, and that we're not just these meat bags living and dying. But it's really interesting. Somebody said that I remember lots of quotes, but I never remember from whom. So I'm really ashamed always that I don't know. But somebody said that capitalism is the worst system, but it's the only system that worked so far. And obviously, I
Well, I
was
mean,
born. I was born in Soviet Union, and that was my birth certificate actually has hammer and sickle, and then I kind of know that story. Obviously, that didn't work out, but I also have keen interest in blockchain and obviously psychedelics. And what you said, I've also heard about it a long time ago that the reason socialism doesn't work is because this planned economy where you have to spread things doesn't work because it's so hard to redistribute. But like if you get Internet of Things and blockchain and AI, uh, maybe there's a way to make it work. So AI could either like fix us or destroy us. There's just it is a it's a really interesting time to be alive. And it's like there's this Chinese proverb that says, I wish you live in an interesting time, which is supposed to be like a negative thing to say, because interesting times are the times which are also the most painful. So yeah, I rarely talk about politics on this podcast. It's really interesting, and I hope I'm not gonna offend anyone. But yeah, like right, it's interesting because we're in this space, right, healing space, and people come and we heal them. But it's also we're in a capitalistic society, so we need to like charge prices and pay wages, and it's kind of difficult because for me, as someone who tries to find that balance between spirituality and business, it's a really difficult balance because it's like those energies seem to be so opposed to each other. But obviously, there doesn't seem to be any other way unless you have huge amounts of money or something like that. Yeah, I just throw lots of words out there. I don't know if you have any future thoughts, or maybe tell us more about your book. Like, what do you think is
Uh,
the next step?
no, also my gut feeling is that capitalism is kind of corresponding to our way of also doing trade, and I think it makes sense um, that we put a value on our services or on our goods. But I think I think we can see by now that unregulated capitalism on a global scale doesn't work because it creates excessive behavior, which results in destruction of the planet and in mass wars. So I think we must find a way to regulate capitalism, and I don't think this is a contradiction. I don't think capitalism needs to be unregulated to be capitalism. I think capitalism actually needs to be regulated, and this can be done through laws, which, for example, regulate the size of a corporation or regulate other things. So I think actually, because I also don't believe in the planned economy, it really didn't work in the Eastern Bloc, because who does the planning? Maybe if there is the blockchain AI that can do the planning, and we all agree that this is the way to go forward, maybe that's a different ball game. So I think actually we do need a new type of AI, because so far the AI that we have, if I understand it correctly, are owned by certain corporations, which then of course have a capitalist, monetary interest is behind the AI. So I think we need, just like we have Bitcoin, I think we need like a free AI that we can all participate, and that is not regulated by one person or one company. So I think actually coding and programming are incredibly important, and we need like libertarian or free thinking people on that front who don't do it for Meta or for some other bullshit corporation, but actually do it for creating a free network. I think we really need that, and then I don't think we need to get rid of capitalism, because we like also to compete. We like to be different. We just don't want billionaires and then 1 billion people starving to death. That's what we don't want. And that is what is going to happen if we don't regulate capitalism. So we have to regulate capitalism. Especially our American friends have to get used to that thought, because it's a very un-American thought, but it's the only thought that will, move us forward. So we have to find a way to regulate the excesses of capitalism. So yeah, I'm curious, how inventive and flexible we are going to be in the future, and obviously, psychedelics help us to become better people. Even though I said before that not necessarily you become a better person, but I would certainly say that the tendency to understand more about yourself and about the limits of your ego, and about empathy, and understanding that we're all one. I think a lot of these like things that I would consider as good things uh, come or are in fact supported by psychedelics. Without wanting to sound too naive, I think it's absolutely important that the ban on psychedelics is being lifted. So a free planetary society obviously will be a society without, prohibition, and we all must, maybe that's the next step, that we all must work on a global scale against our governments who still try to prevent us uh, taking these substances. I think that's quite important, and I see it as an important step in the liberation of our species. And of course, that's the reason why it's forbidden, because governments don't want us to be free. As you said before, they want us to be, dumb consumers. But that's not going to stand. It doesn't. It's not what we really want as human beings. It's just amazing how many people are actually buying into it, and we're all in a way buying into it on a daily basis. If we live like in a city or something like that, we buy like a coffee that's way too expensive, and but we just have to be aware, and we have to be smart, and we have to be sensitive, and that's a challenge for every person. Like, every person has to change, and the way to change is actually to do therapy. And psychedelics are a therapy that is the quickest that can work for, a big amount of for everybody, actually, I would say, or for most people. It can be very beneficial. Or just love. We have to love. But some people just don't know how it is to love. Like, I didn't know for a long time. So it's not so easy. We grow up in a strange world, full of machines and cold behavior, especially in, like, Germany, or in the northwestern hemisphere of the planet. I mean, it's because we're so focused on external things, on money, on our egos. We really have to form as human beings. We have to get back to who we really are, because I think we're capable to do so much more. And whenever you meet a nice human being, that can happen like every day, just going to the market and buying a bunch of apples from a woman that, has, smiles at you from the heart. It's all there. We just have to be conscious of it and be aware of it and implement it in all of our actions, in our daily lives, as well as in our spiritual practice.
Yeah, everything you talk about, from loving more and being more creative, and just kind of that evolution of consciousness. I think that definitely psychedelics is that secret ingredient that we're missing as a society. It's just a matter of how long it will take, and, as you said, whether we'll still be alive for it. And the world is so crazy right now that, like, people, when they come here and they drink ayahuasca with us, we tell them when they go back home to not watch the news and to try to focus on themselves, because in the end of the day, the only thing we can do is start with ourselves and just get saner and happier and more loving, and then hopefully it will spill over to the society. But yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned Germany, and my retreat is called La Huayra, which is like two words put together. And I, for a period of time, I had so many German employees that we had this joke, and we called it Das Huayra, because we had more than half of our team were German speakers. And
How you call it?
jokingly, we call it Das Huayra.
Okay.
So, but lots of Germans are attracted to
Germans need a lot of
psychedelics.
ayahuasca, probably.
Yeah, and it helps a lot to sort of loosen up and reconnect. I mean, I'm from Latvia originally, which is not too dissimilar from Germany in the way people act and live their lives. So, what have you noticed so far with how's it in Germany? Do you see more people interested? Are people reading your books to learn more about history, and then they get excited about psychedelics? Or what do you think? What do you think about German future with plant medicines or psychedelics?
Um, well, I mean, I live in Berlin, which is probably the most liberated place in Germany, most educated place. So there's like tons of people who do psychedelics and work on themselves and have reached some kind of higher consciousness. Um, but the psychedelic scene is still not as big as, for example, in the United States, where it's like already like totally mainstream to be like psychedelic, which I think is great. And I would not be surprised if the United States will be the first um, Western country that legalizes psychedelics, which would be great because it would probably have an effect on other countries. So in Germany, we're not like leading the pack in terms of the psychedelic revolution, but I don't think we're like lagging behind. I think we're like in the middle field. Um, and my books are being read. I'm kind of known, or my work's kind of known in Germany. Um, so I think it's okay, but still, we have very conservative government that supports wars and behaves in a completely irresponsible, despicable way. Um, that's actually why I want to run also in politics in Germany. Um, I want to become German Chancellor in 8 years. So my campaign is slowly starting. The next elections are in 4 years. I already want to take part with my new party in the elections. And then in 8 years, I want to take over the country and then dismantle the system from within and work for the planetary society that will actually overcome nation states. So if that works, of course, Germany would, obviously also legalize all psychedelics immediately. Um, so I would ask for anyone that listens to this podcast to support my campaign.
Yeah, if you're, especially if they're German, right? I'm assuming.
Um, yeah, but also non-Germans can support.
Yeah.
Basically it's an international movement, the Stone Sapiens movement. It's not about Germany. It's about humans.
How can they support you? Is there some kind of link you have, or something they need to sign, or?
Um, I'm still like starting the political movement right now, but you could already subscribe to my Substack, and then you will be, then you will keep in touch with the developments. That's the Stone Sapiens Substack. So I invite everyone to join at least for free, or even with a paid subscription. Then of course you support the evolving community. That would be good.
Sounds good. I mean, you do sound very passionate about those things. So even though you're a journalist and historian, you do feel more like a politician. I can see that that side of you.
Yeah, the
Uh,
world needs changing, and I think I could help bring about some of that change. So I think it's kind of fun, and I don't want to leave politics to all these assholes that are doing it right now,
mm.
because they actually have a lot of power and they do a lot of bad things. So it would be nice to change that a little bit.
Well, I hope you succeed. It would be great to have met you then.
Yeah, I would come as German Chancellor to Colombia and pay a visit. And
Sounds good. Maybe we can spread it to here as well. Like, for example, in Colombia, there's this big problem with coca and cocaine and stuff like that. I think if they would just legalize it, it would take away the money from the criminals. And there's, you know,
yeah, of course,
fighting drugs is
all
like
drugs have to be
futile.
legalized. I mean, also the bad drugs have to be legalized, because they're not really bad. I mean, they're just handled in a very bad way. I mean, coca was a sacred plant for a very long time, and there's no reason why it should be illegal now. Obviously, it's a way to keep countries like Colombia or Mexico down. Let them sink in drug war.
Mm,
Let them let them not prosper, because obviously drug cartels would be corporations, or would be companies that would be regulated, and that would pay taxes, and that would employ people, and that would then process their products, which might be heavily regulated. But the current situations in Colombia certainly cannot go on like this, and also in Mexico it's just drowning in violence, and that's because of the war on drugs.
mm. Yeah, I mean, coca has a good history before it was synthesized and sort of taken away from its tradition. Speaking of which, I know you mentioned in some interview that psychedelics were always used as a ritual. Like there was always some kind of tradition historically as you research this topic. So, what have you found in that direction? Why is that so?
I mean, that's like a very long answer, because it concerns so many substances in so many places of the world, and I certainly examine them all in the new book Stone Sapiens. But I don't know how to summarize it. I mean, basically, psychoactive plants have always been with us, because they do stimulate our brain, and we are the creatures of the brain. That's our um, that is our unique feature that sets us apart from the animals, and that comes with that is supported at least by drugs or psychoactive compounds. So it's normal for humans to take stuff, and change their brain. The idea to make drugs illegal is like a completely nonsensical idea. It's like an anti-human approach, basically. So it's I think there will be obviously a time in history where we will, shake our heads, that in the 20th century, in the 21st century, drugs were like illegal, and they would put you in prison if you would take like magic mushrooms or something. That just doesn't make any sense from an evolutionary standpoint.
Yeah, especially given how um those plants they grow everywhere. Like here recently we had a guest and she came and we had this decorative plant that's just a pretty plant, and she's like, well, do you know this is a psychedelic? And a lot of the plants we don't even know are psychedelic, and most plants contain DMT in some shape or form. So yeah, it's very hard to avoid people from consuming drugs or medicines. For example, here in the common manure, you can find the mushrooms. Like, how can you control that? So, yeah, I agree. It's probably the right way to go. So, but yeah, it's time for us to wrap up. I think it's late there in Germany. Any last messages to the audience, and where can they find your books and your links and stuff like that you want to share?
Well, I would, emphasize again on the Substack, Stone Sapiens. And of course, check out the books. They're available also in Spanish, uh, in English, or in other languages. I think it's fun to read a book once in a while. So why not start with Tripped?
Sounds good. I haven't read, but of what I've found, it's a really great book, so I recommend it, guys. And yeah, Norman, it was a pleasure having you on, and I hope you finally make your way to Luara soon. I know you were supposed to be here even
Yeah,
sooner, but eventually we'll make it happen.
I will come for sure, because I haven't had my really good ayahuasca experience yet. So I'm curious whether it will ever happen, and maybe at your retreat it will.
Well, if you come for a week, I can almost guarantee you that you'll have a good ayahuasca experience.
If I come, I'll stay for a week for sure.
Yeah, If you come for 4 days, then I'll give you like 80% chance, but 1 week is
I'll come for a week.
99%.
Okay, cool.
Cool, Norman. Thank you so much. Guys, as always, you've been listening to Ayahuasca Podcast, your host, Sam Believ, and I will see you in the next episode.